The sun was setting outside the hospital window, casting long shadows across the empty hallway. Tom Wilson sat beside his daughter's bed, his weathered hands clutching hers as the steady beep of the heart monitor kept time. At 52, Tom's face showed every worry line earned during his daughter Lily's 3-year battle with a rare form of cancer. His eyes, once bright and full of laughter, now looked hollow as he watched his only child's chest rise and fall with each labored breath. Lily had just turned 16 last month. They'd celebrated in this very room, with balloons taped to the IV stand and a small chocolate cake that she'd managed only one bite of before feeling too sick to continue. Still, she'd smiled that day, a genuine smile that reminded Tom of who she used to be before the illness took hold. "Dad," she whispered now, her voice so faint he had to lean closer. "Remember that sunset we photographed at the lake? The one where the sky looked like it was on fire?" Tom nodded, his throat tight. "Of course I do, sweetheart. You said it was like the sky was putting on a show just for us." Photography had been their thing. Tom had picked up the hobby when Lily was just 4 years old, wanting to document every milestone, every silly face, every moment of wonder. By the time she was 10, Lily was begging for her own camera, and soon father and daughter were spending weekends hunting for the perfect shot. A deer in the woods behind their house, frost patterns on the winter windows, the way sunlight filtered through leaves in their backyard. "I wish we could do that again," Lily said, her eyelids heavy. "Just one more time." Tom squeezed her hand. "We will, Lil, when you're feeling stronger." But they both knew that wasn't going to happen. The doctors had given them the news 3 days ago. The treatments weren't working anymore. There was nothing left to try. They were talking in terms of weeks now, maybe days. Tom's wife Jenny appeared in the doorway, clutching 3 paper cups of vending machine coffee. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, dark circles under her eyes from sleeping in hospital chairs for the past week. They exchanged a look over Lily's bed, a look of shared grief, of helplessness, of love. "Here you go," Jenny said, forcing cheerfulness into her voice as she handed a cup to Tom. She placed another on Lily's bedside table, even though they all knew Lily probably wouldn't drink it. It was the normal thing to do, and they were all desperately clinging to anything that felt normal. That night, while Jenny dozed in the chair by the window, Tom sat scrolling through the thousands of photos on his phone. Lily as a toddler with ice cream all over her face. Lily on her first bike, arms raised in triumph. Lily and her best friend Anna dressed as superheroes for Halloween. Each swipe of his finger brought another memory, another stab of pain at what they were about to lose. When the end came 3 days later, it was both sudden and expected, the way these things often are. One moment Lily was there, her breathing, shallow but steady, and then she wasn't. The room filled with nurses and doctors, but Tom knew before they said anything. He felt it, the absence, the emptiness where his daughter's bright spirit had been. The days that followed passed in a blur. Tom moved through the motions of planning a funeral like a man underwater, everything muffled and distant. Jenny handled the phone calls, the arrangements, the endless stream of casseroles dropped off by well-meaning neighbors. Tom retreated to his home office, surrounded by cameras and lenses and printed photographs of the daughter he'd lost. "Tom?" Jenny stood in the doorway, her face pale but composed. "The funeral home called. They need to know if we want to place any personal items with Lily." Personal items, things to go in the ground with their daughter. The thought made Tom's stomach turn. "Her camera," he said finally. "She should have her camera." Jenny nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "That seems right." That night Tom couldn't sleep. He paced the house restlessly, ending up in Lily's room. He hadn't been able to go in there since they'd brought her home from the hospital for the last time, when she was too weak to do anything but lie in bed and look out the window at the maple tree she loved. Now, he stood in the doorway, taking in the details of his daughter's life. The bookshelf packed with young adult novels and photography books, the bulletin board covered with pictures of Lily and her friends, the desk where her laptop still sat closed, waiting for someone who would never return to open it. Tom moved to the desk and sat down heavily in the chair. Lily's camera, the one Jenny had mentioned, sat on a shelf above the desk. It was her pride and joy, a digital SLR they'd saved up to buy for her 14th birthday. Tom reached for it, his hands trembling slightly as he turned it on. The screen lit up, showing the last image Lily had captured, a self-portrait taken in this very room. She was clearly ill, thin and pale against her pillows, but she was smiling. Really smiling, with that spark in her eyes that had always been uniquely hers. Tom pressed the button to view more photos, scrolling backward through time. There were dozens from the hospital, close-ups of flowers visitors had brought, the view from her window, nurses making funny faces. Before that, shots from their backyard, the last time she'd been strong enough to sit outside. At the bottom of the memory card, Tom found a folder labeled "After I'm Gone." His heart skipped a beat as he opened it. Inside was a single text document. Tom clicked on it and Lily's words filled the screen. "Dad, if you're reading this, I guess I didn't make it. Don't be mad that I made a folder with this name. We both knew what was happening even when we pretended we didn't. I've been thinking a lot about what happens after, not heaven or anything, though maybe that too. But what happens here with you and Mom and everyone else? I won't get to see it, and that's the weirdest thing to me. Life will just go on, but I won't be in it anymore. Remember how we always talked about capturing moments? How a photograph freezes time? I wish there was a way to keep capturing moments even after I'm gone, to see how people remember me, or if they do at all. Anyway, I love you. Take care of Mom, and don't stop taking pictures just because I'm not in them anymore. Love, Lily." Tom sat very still, tears streaming down his face. He read the note 3 more times, his daughter's voice so clear in his head he could almost hear her speaking the words. An idea began to form in his mind. A crazy, probably inappropriate idea, but one that wouldn't let go once it took hold. What if he could do what Lily had wished for? What if he could somehow capture what happened after she was gone? Tom looked at the camera in his hands, then at the collection of smaller, more discreet cameras he used for nature photography. There was one in particular, a tiny, motion-activated camera he'd used to capture wildlife at night. It was small enough to hide with enough battery life to record for days. He knew it was unusual, maybe even wrong, but as he sat in his daughter's room surrounded by the remnants of her too short life, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that this was something he needed to do, for Lily and for himself. The funeral was scheduled for 2 days from now. He had, until then, to decide if he was really going to do this. Place a hidden camera in his daughter's coffin before it was lowered into the ground. To capture what happened after she was gone, just as she'd wished. Tom closed his eyes, the camera clutched tightly in his hands. In the quiet of the night, he could almost hear Lily's voice encouraging him, urging him to take one last photograph for her, the one she'd never get to see herself. Morning would come, and with it, Tom would have to face the reality of his decision. But for now, in the darkness of his daughter's room, surrounded by memories frozen in time, he allowed himself to imagine what might happen if he honored his daughter's final, unspoken request. What would the camera capture, and would it bring the comfort he so desperately needed, or only add to the weight of grief already crushing down on him? Only time would tell. And Tom had the strangest feeling that, wherever Lily was now, she was watching, waiting to see what he would decide. The morning of the funeral arrived with a gentle rain that seemed fitting for the occasion. Tom stood at the bedroom window, watching droplets race down the glass while he adjusted his tie. He hadn't worn a suit since his brother's wedding 3 years ago, and the collar felt too tight, like it was choking him. Or maybe that was just grief. Behind him, Jenny was putting on earrings, small pearls that Lily had given her for Mother's Day last year. They hadn't spoken much since last night when Tom had finally shared his idea. "You want to put what in her coffin?" Jenny had asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "A camera," Tom repeated, showing her the small device in his palm. "It's motion activated. It would only record when someone approaches. Jenny stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had. But why would you— I found a note from Lily, Tom explained, showing her the text file on the camera. She wondered what happens after she's gone. Who remembers her, how they remember her. This is a way to, I don't know, honor that curiosity. Jenny, read the note twice, tears streaming down her face. Tom, it's not normal. The funeral director would never allow it. They don't have to know, Tom said, surprised by his own determination. It's small enough to hide with the flowers, or tucked into the lining. No one would see it. Now, as they prepared to say their final goodbyes to their daughter, the weight of his decision pressed on Tom's shoulders. The tiny camera sat in his suit pocket, feeling much heavier than its actual size. Are you still planning to do it? Jenny asked, meeting his eyes in the mirror's reflection. Tom nodded. Unless you really don't want me to. Jenny was quiet for a long moment. I think it's unusual, she finally said. And I'm not sure what you're hoping to find, but Lily always did look at the world differently. Maybe this is the right way to say goodbye to her. The funeral home was filled with flowers, roses and lilies and carnations in every corner. Photos of Lily covered easels near the entrance. Lily as a baby, as a grinning toddler with ice cream on her chin, as a serious-faced middle schooler holding her first camera, and finally as the beautiful young woman she'd become, even as illness had stolen her strength. Tom and Jenny stood at the entrance, accepting hugs and condolences from a seemingly endless line of people, relatives, neighbors, Lily's classmates and teachers, even people from town they barely knew. Each person had a story about Lily, how she'd helped them with homework or taken a beautiful photo of their family, or simply made them laugh on a difficult day. She was such a bright spirit, Mrs. Henderson, Lily's photography teacher, said as she clasped Tom's hand. The world feels dimmer without her. Tom nodded, unable to speak around the lump in his throat. Before the main service began, the funeral, director gave Tom and Jenny a few minutes alone with Lily. The closed part of the casket concealed the ravages of her illness. Only her face was visible, peaceful in a way it hadn't been during those final painful weeks. Jenny had chosen Lily's favorite blue dress, the one she'd worn to her cousin's wedding last summer before she got too sick to attend special events. Jenny leaned down to adjust a strand of Lily's hair and whisper something in her ear. A private goodbye between mother and daughter. When she stepped back, her face was wet with tears, but there was a calmness there too, a kind of acceptance. I'll give you a moment, she told Tom, squeezing his arm before walking to the back of the room. Tom stood alone beside the casket, his heart pounding. This was his chance. He slipped his hand into his pocket, fingers closing around the small camera. He'd charged it fully and tested it twice. It would record for up to 3 days when motion activated. I hope you forgive me for this, Lil, he whispered as he carefully slid the camera into the casket, tucking it into the satin lining near where her hand rested. It was nearly invisible, just as he'd planned. This one's for you. The service was beautiful, if such a thing could be said about a funeral for a 16-year-old girl. Lily's best friend Anna read a poem she'd written. The photography club from school presented Jenny with a book of Lily's best work. Tom somehow found the strength to stand and share memories of his daughter, camping trips and photo safaris, and late-night talks about the meaning of life. Lily always saw beauty where others saw nothing special, he said, his voice breaking. A leaf on the sidewalk, raindrops on a window, the way light fell across an ordinary kitchen table. She taught me to see the world through her eyes, and even though she's gone, I'm still trying to see things the way she would. As he spoke these words, the weight of the secret camera seemed to ease slightly. Maybe this unusual final act wasn't so strange after all. Maybe it was exactly what Lily would have wanted, one last chance to capture something unseen. After the service, 6 of Lily's uncles and cousins carried the casket to the hearse. Tom watched it go, suddenly panicked at the thought of the camera sliding out of place being discovered. But everything went smoothly. No one noticed anything unusual. The burial was small, just family and close friends gathered under a cluster of umbrellas as the rain continued to fall softly. A canopy had been set up over the gravesite, but the edges dripped steadily, creating a curtain of water around their small group. Tom barely heard the words the minister spoke. His mind was on the casket being lowered into the ground, the camera, hidden inside. Was this disrespectful? Was it wrong? Or was it one last act of connection with his daughter who had always been curious about the hidden things in life? Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, the minister intoned, and then it was time for each person to drop a flower onto the casket. Tom went last, placing a yellow rose, Lily's favorite, on top of the polished wood. "Goodbye, sweetheart," he whispered. "I love you." The reception afterward was held at their house, filled with people eating casseroles and sharing stories about Lily. Tom moved through the rooms like a ghost, accepting condolences, nodding at appropriate moments. But his mind was elsewhere. Already he was wondering what the camera might be capturing. Was it recording darkness and silence, or was something happening that he couldn't imagine? Late that night, after everyone had gone and Jenny had finally fallen into an exhausted sleep, Tom sat in his office surrounded by photographs of his daughter. The house felt unbearably quiet without Lily's music playing or her laughter echoing down the hallway. He opened his laptop and stared at the empty screen. In a few days he would go back to the cemetery. He had already made arrangements with the groundskeeper, a former colleague who owed him a favor, to access the maintenance tunnels that ran beneath the newer section of graves. It wasn't exactly legal, but the man had agreed after Tom explained about the camera. "I just need to retrieve it," Tom had said. "No one will know, nothing will be disturbed." Now, waiting in the silent house, Tom wondered what he would find when he recovered the camera. Would it just be darkness? Would it show the casket being lowered into the ground, dirt falling on top? Or would there be something else, something unexpected? 3 days. He would wait 3 days and then he would know. Tom closed his laptop and looked at the framed photo on his desk, Lily holding her camera, grinning at him from behind the lens. He could almost hear her voice. "Sometimes you have to break the rules to get the perfect shot, Dad." For the first time since her death, Tom smiled. Whatever happened next, he knew Lily would have approved of his unconventional final gesture. She had always been the one to push boundaries, to look beyond what was obvious or expected. This last photograph, this final record, was for her. 3 days after the funeral, Tom woke before dawn. He hadn't slept more than a few hours at a stretch since Lily died, but last night had been particularly restless. Today was the day he would retrieve the camera, if everything went according to plan. Jenny was still asleep when he slipped out of bed. He dressed quietly in the dark. Jeans, a black sweatshirt, work boots, clothes that wouldn't stand out but also wouldn't mind getting dirty. He wasn't sure exactly what retrieving the camera would entail, but he imagined it wouldn't be clean work. In the kitchen, he made coffee more out of habit than desire. The house felt hollow in the early morning light. Pictures of Lily were everywhere. On the refrigerator, hanging on walls propped on shelves, her absence was a physical thing, pressing against his chest, making it hard to breathe. Tom's phone buzzed. A text from Ray, the cemetery groundskeeper. "Gate unlocked. Maintenance shed open. Be there in 30. Tom had told Jenny his plan the night before, not the details, she didn't want to know those, but the general idea. "Are you sure you want to do this?" she'd asked, concern etched on her tired face. What if there's nothing? What if it's just darkness?" "Then at least I'll know," Tom had replied. "But I have to try, Jen. For Lily." Jenny hadn't argued. Further, she understood in her way, even if she thought it was unusual. Grief made people do strange things. This was Tom's way of holding on a little longer. The cemetery was eerily quiet when Tom arrived. A light fog hung over the grounds, turning the headstones into shadowy shapes. He parked near the maintenance area, out of sight from the main road. Ray's truck was already there. "Morning," Ray said as Tom approached. He was a burly man in his 60s with a gray beard and hands rough from decades of outdoor work. "You sure about this?" Tom nodded. "Thanks for doing this. I know it's asking a lot." Ray shrugged. "Your girl was special. My grandson was in her photography club at school. She helped him win that contest last year. He paused. I don't know what you're hoping to find with this camera business, but if it brings you some peace, I'm willing to bend the rules a bit. He led Tom to a small concrete structure half hidden by hedges. Inside was a metal door set into the ground. Ray unlocked it with a heavy key from his ring. These tunnels were built in the 90s when they expanded this section, he explained as he pulled the door open. Makes maintenance easier, especially in winter. They run underneath each row of plots. He handed Tom a flashlight. Your daughter's about 50 yards that way. Section E, row 7. You can access it through a maintenance panel. Tom swallowed hard. You're not coming? Ray shook his head. Figure that's private business. I'll keep watch up here. Take your time, but try to be done before the office staff arrives at 8. The tunnel was cool and smelled of damp earth. Tom's flashlight cast long shadows as he made his way forward, counting the markers on the ceiling that indicated which row was above. His heart pounded in his ears, partly from the physical exertion of crouching in the low tunnel, partly from the sheer strangeness of what he was doing. When he reached Section E, row 7, Tom found the access panel Ray had mentioned. It was a metal hatch about 2 feet square, designed to allow workers to reach pipes and wiring without disturbing the graves above. Tom hesitated, his hand on the cold metal. Was he really going to do this? Lily's face flashed in his mind, not sick and pale as she'd been at the end, but laughing, alive, curious about everything. What happens after we're gone, Dad? She'd asked once during a late-night philosophy discussion. Not the heaven stuff, but here, in the real world. Do people remember us? How do they remember us? With renewed determination, Tom opened the panel. It led to a narrow vertical shaft with metal rungs embedded in the concrete. He climbed up carefully until he reached another smaller panel. This one, he knew, would open directly beneath Lily's plot. The work was harder than he'd anticipated. The soil above the tunnel had been disturbed by the burial but was starting to settle. Tom had to dig carefully with the small folding shovel Ray had provided, creating a space just large enough for him to reach the bottom of the casket. Sweat dripped down his face despite the cool air. His breathing echoed in the confined space. Several times he had to stop, overcome by the reality of what he was doing, literally digging beneath his daughter's grave. But each time, he pushed through the feeling and continued. Finally, his hand touched wood. The bottom of Lily's casket. Tom felt along the smooth surface until he found what he was looking for. A small access panel built into modern caskets for funeral home purposes. With trembling fingers, he unscrewed it. The opening was just big enough for his hand. Tom reached inside, feeling around carefully until his fingers closed around the small camera. Relief washed over him as he pulled it out. It was still there, untouched. Now he just had to hope it had captured something, anything, that would help him understand what happened after Lily was gone. Tom carefully replaced the access panel and began the process of refilling the small hole he'd dug. When he was done, there would be no evidence he'd been there at all, just a father with a camera full of secrets. Back at home, Tom went straight to his office and closed the door. Jenny was in the kitchen making breakfast, but she hadn't asked to see the camera when he came in. She just looked at his dirty clothes and grimy hands and nodded. "There's hot water for a shower when you're ready," was all she'd said. Now sitting at his desk, Tom connected the camera to his laptop. His hands were clean but still shaking slightly as he navigated to the memory card. There were files there, several of them. The camera had recorded something. Tom took a deep breath and clicked on the first file. Darkness at first, then dim light as the casket was closed at the funeral home, the sound of the lid being secured, then darkness again, and the muffled sounds of movement as the casket was transported to the church, then to the cemetery. Tom fast-forwarded through hours of darkness and silence, his heart sinking. Maybe this had been a mistake after all. Maybe there was nothing to see. But then movement, light, the unmistakable sound of dirt hitting the top of the casket as they filled in the grave. Tom watched, transfixed as the burial he'd attended from above was now shown from inside. It was disturbing and fascinating at the same time. More darkness followed. More silence. Tom kept forwarding through the footage, checking the timestamps. Nearly a full day passed with nothing, and then something changed. A sound. Faint at first, then clearer. Someone was at the grave. The camera, responding to the vibrations of footsteps above, had activated. "Hey, Lily." A voice. Young, female. Tom recognized it immediately. Anna, Lily's best friend since 3rd grade. "I know you were just buried yesterday, but I had to come back. There's something I never told you." Tom's finger hovered over the pause button. This was private. He shouldn't be listening, but he couldn't stop himself. "I was so jealous of you sometimes," Anna continued, her voice breaking. "You were so talented with your photography, and everyone loved you, and I felt invisible, next to you. I never told you because it felt so petty, and now I feel terrible because none of that matters. I would give anything to have you back, to be in your shadow again." Tears streamed down Tom's face as he listened to Anna pour her heart out to his daughter's grave. This was what Lily had wanted to know, what people really thought, what they really felt when they thought no one was listening. The camera recorded several more visitors over the 3 days. Lily's photography teacher came and sat quietly for nearly an hour, occasionally speaking about how Lily had changed her perspective on teaching. A boy from school whom Tom barely recognized confessed to having had a crush on Lily since 7th grade, but never having the courage to tell her. Most surprising was the visit from Lily's grandfather, Tom's father, who hadn't attended the funeral due to a falling out with Tom years ago. The old man placed flowers on the grave and spoke softly about regrets and missed opportunities. "I should have been there for you, little one," he said, his gruff voice softer than Tom had ever heard it. "Your dad was right to keep me away after what happened, but I want you to know I loved you. I was just too stubborn and too proud to show it the right way." Tom sat back in his chair, overwhelmed. This was what Lily had wanted to know. What happens after we're gone? Not darkness, not silence, but love continuing, regret continuing, memory continuing. He reached for his phone. It was time to call his father. Tom stared at his phone for a long time before making the call. He and his father hadn't spoken in nearly 5 years. Not since that terrible Thanksgiving when harsh words were exchanged and bridges were burned. Tom had kept Lily in touch with her grandfather through cards and occasional supervised visits, but the relationship between the two men had seemed beyond repair. Until now. The phone rang 4 times before his father answered. "Hello?" The voice sounded older than Tom remembered, more fragile. "Dad, it's me." Tom's voice caught in his throat. "It's Tom." A long pause followed. "I know who it is," his father finally said. "I've been waiting for you to call." "You have?" "Ever since I visited her grave. Figured you might have people watching the place telling you who showed up." Tom almost laughed at how close to the truth that was. "Something like that," he said. "I heard you were there." Another pause. "She was my only grandchild." "Of course, I was there." His father's voice softened. "I should have been at the funeral too. I was wrong about that." "Yes, you were," Tom agreed, but without the anger that would have colored those words a few weeks ago. Grief had a way of putting things in perspective. "But I was wrong about some things too." "Like what?" "Like keeping you away from her as much as I did. She asked about you, you know, even at the end." His father made a sound that might have been a stifled sob. "You free for lunch tomorrow?" he asked after collecting himself. "That diner on Main still makes a decent club sandwich." "Yeah," Tom said, feeling a weight lift from his chest. "Yeah, I'm free." After hanging up, Tom sat in silence, contemplating the unexpected turn of events. The camera had already revealed things he never expected to see, connections he thought were long broken, and he'd only watched half the recordings. "Tom?" Jenny appeared in the doorway, a cup of tea in her hands. "Everything okay? I heard you on the phone." "I just called my dad," Tom said, still a bit shocked at himself. "We're having lunch tomorrow." Jenny's eyebrows shot up. "Your dad? Really?" Tom gestured to the laptop screen. He visited Lily's grave, said some things I needed to hear. Jenny entered the room slowly and stood behind Tom's chair, looking at the paused video on the screen. So the camera worked. It actually recorded people. More than I expected, Tom said. Do you want to see? Jenny hesitated, then nodded. Show me. Together they watched more of the recordings. The camera had captured a steady stream of visitors to Lily's grave over the 3 days it was active. Some were people they knew well, Lily's friends, teachers, neighbors. Others were more surprising. Classmates Lily had barely mentioned, a bus driver who said Lily had made his route brighter every morning with her smile, a nurse from the hospital who brought a small stone angel to place on the grave. I took care of so many kids, the nurse said, her voice thick with emotion. But your daughter, she was special. She never complained even when I knew she was in pain. And she took my picture once. Said I looked like an angel in my white uniform with the sun behind me. No one ever said anything like that to me before. Tom and Jenny watched as the nurse placed the small stone figure at the base of the headstone. So I brought her an angel to watch over her, she said. Sleep well, sweet girl. Jenny wiped tears from her face. I had no idea she touched so many lives, she whispered. Neither did I, Tom admitted. All those people, all those stories about her. It's like seeing a whole different side of our daughter. They continued watching. There were moments of laughter as visitors shared funny memories of Lily. There were tears, plenty of them. But most striking was the sense of connection that remained, even after death, the invisible threads that bound Lily to the world she'd left behind. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the office, they reached the final recording. The timestamp showed it was from just a few hours before Tom had retrieved the camera. The visitor was someone neither of them recognized at first, a young man in his early 20s, tall and thin, with a camera hanging around his neck. Hey there, Lily, he said, his voice soft. You don't know me. My name's Peter. I'm a photography student at the community college. Tom and Jenny exchanged puzzled looks. Your photography teacher showed us your work last semester, Peter continued. Those sunset shots at the lake? Man, they were something else, changed how I thought about light and composition. I've been trying to capture moments like that ever since. He knelt down, placing a small printout on the grave. The camera angle didn't show what the image was, but Tom could guess. One of Lily's sunset photographs. Anyway, I just wanted to say thanks. Your eye for beauty helped me find mine. I got into that summer program in New York, the one your teacher said you were planning to apply for. When I get back, I'll come tell you all about it. Peter stood, brushing dirt from his knees. Rest easy, Lily. Your art lives on. After he walked away, Jenny and Tom sat in stunned silence. She never even met him, Jenny finally said. But she changed his life. Tom nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. This was what Lily had wanted to know. What happened after she was gone. Not just darkness, not just grief, but impact, connection, a legacy that continued even without her physical presence. I think, Tom said slowly, we need to do something with this. With the recordings? Jenny asked, looking concerned. Tom, these are private moments. We can't just share them with the world. No, not the actual recordings, Tom agreed. But the idea behind them. Lily's vision, her way of seeing beauty in ordinary things, the way she connected with people through her art. The seed of an idea began to form in Tom's mind. What if we started a photography scholarship in her name? Or a foundation to help young photographers? We could use her work as inspiration, share her vision with others like that Peter kid. Jenny's face softened. She would have loved that. And maybe, Tom continued, warming to the idea, we could create a special exhibit of her work. Not just her photographs, but stories from people whose lives she touched. A way to show how one person, one 16-year-old girl with a camera, can create ripples that continue long after she's gone. Jenny reached for his hand. That sounds perfect. That night, after backing up all the recordings onto a secure hard drive, Tom deleted the original files from the camera. Some things weren't meant to be shared. The raw grief, the private confessions, those would remain between the visitors and Lily, with only Tom and Jenny as accidental witnesses. But the impact of what they'd seen couldn't be erased so easily. As Tom lay in bed that night listening to Jenny's steady breathing beside him, he thought about all those connections he'd never known about. All those lives Lily had touched in ways big and small. For the first time since her diagnosis, Tom felt something close to peace. Not happiness. That was still too distant, too hard to imagine in a world without his daughter. But a sense that Lily's short life had meaning beyond what he'd understood before. That her story wasn't finished, even if her life was. Tomorrow, he would have lunch with his father, beginning the slow work of mending that broken relationship. Next week, he and Jenny would meet with Lily's photography teacher to discuss the foundation idea. The path forward was still shadowed with grief, but no longer felt completely dark. Before drifting off to sleep, Tom imagined Lily with her camera, capturing one last sunset, the kind where the sky looked like it was on fire, putting on a show just for her. In his mind's eye, he saw her turn to him with that bright smile that had always been uniquely hers. "See, Dad?" she seemed to say. "I told you the best pictures are the ones no one expects." 1 year had passed since Tom placed the camera in Lily's coffin. 1 year of grief, healing, and unexpected new beginnings. The seasons had cycled through, winter melting into spring, spring warming into summer, summer cooling into fall, and now winter again, with snow dusting Lily's headstone like powdered sugar. Tom stood at the grave, a fresh bouquet of yellow roses in his hands. Yellow had been Lily's favorite color, the color of sunshine, she'd always said, even on the darkest days. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, brushing snow from the top of the stone before placing the flowers in the metal vase embedded in the ground. "Big day today. Thought I'd stop by first to tell you all about it." In the year since Lily's death, Tom had changed in ways he never could have imagined. The camera footage had been just the beginning, a catalyst that transformed his paralyzing grief into something purposeful. The idea that had formed that night while watching the recordings with Jenny had grown into something remarkable. "The foundation opens today," Tom continued, his breath clouding in the cold air. "The Lily Wilson Foundation for Young Photographers. We've got our first 20 scholarship recipients coming to the ceremony tonight, kids from all over the state who might not otherwise have a chance to pursue photography." He smiled, remembering how Lily had saved for months to buy her first real camera. How thrilled she'd been when she finally held it in her hands. "Your mom's handling the refreshments. Says we need real food, not just those fancy little appetizers that leave everyone hungry. You know how she is." Tom brushed a bit more snow from the stone, tracing Lily's name with his gloved finger. "Your grandfather's been a big help with the foundation. Never knew the old man had such a head for business. He's been reaching out to his contacts, getting donations, making sure the money goes where it needs to go. We're talking again, really talking. Wish it hadn't taken losing you to make that happen, but I think you'd be happy about it." The relationship with his father had been healing slowly. Weekly lunches had turned into fishing trips, then into a genuine partnership as they worked together on the foundation. The old grudges hadn't disappeared entirely. There were still moments of tension, old habits that died hard. But there was forgiveness now. Understanding. A shared purpose that bridged the gaps between them. "Anna's coming tonight too," Tom said, referring to Lily's best friend. "She's been helping with the website, putting together a virtual gallery of your work. Said it's helping her work through her own grief. Remember how she said she was jealous of you? Now she's majoring in photography at State. Says you inspired her." Tom fell silent for a moment, watching a cardinal land on a nearby tree branch. Lily would have loved to photograph that flash of red against the white snow. She had always noticed the small moments of beauty that others missed. "The exhibit was a bigger success than we expected," Tom continued. "Your teacher helped us put together those prints from your portfolio. The ones from the lake, the series on hands, those street scenes from downtown. People were amazed that a 16-year-old could see the world that way. We sold every print, all proceeds going to the foundation." What Tom didn't say, couldn't say even now, was how he'd struggled with whether to include any mention of the camera in the coffin. In the end, he and Jenny had decided to keep that private. The recordings themselves would never be shared, but the impact of what they'd discovered through them, the connections Lily had made, the lives she'd touched, that became the heart of the Foundation's mission. "There's something else," Tom said, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "Something I haven't told anyone yet, not even your mom." He pulled a small envelope from his pocket and opened it carefully with gloved hands. "I've been taking pictures again. First time since you got sick. Nothing fancy, just everyday moments that catch my eye. The way morning light hits the kitchen table, rain patterns on the window, shadows on the sidewalk." From the envelope, he withdrew a small photograph, a sunset over the lake where he and Lily had taken so many pictures together. "It's not as good as yours would have been," he said with a small smile, "but I think you'd approve." He tucked the photo back into the envelope and slipped it under the flowers. A private offering from father to daughter. "I miss you every day, Lil. Not just the big moments, but the small ones too. The sound of your laugh. The way you'd get excited about the perfect light for a photograph. Even those terrible pancakes you insisted on making every Sunday morning." Tom wiped his eyes. The grief was still there, a companion that never fully left. But it had changed shape over the months, becoming less sharp-edged, more bittersweet. Less like a weight crushing him and more like a shadow that followed him, reminding him of what he'd lost but also what he'd had. "I better get going. Your mom will kill me if I'm late for the opening." As Tom turned to leave, he noticed someone approaching from the other side of the cemetery, a young man with a camera around his neck. It took him a moment to recognize Peter, the photography student who had visited Lily's grave a year ago without ever having met her. Tom waited, watching as Peter placed a small framed photograph on Lily's grave. From this distance, Tom couldn't see what it was, but he could guess. One of Peter's own works inspired by Lily's vision. "Mr. Wilson?" Peter called, noticing him for the first time. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Just visiting before the big event tonight," Tom said, walking over to shake Peter's hand. "Will you be there?" Peter nodded. "Wouldn't miss it. Your daughter's work changed how I see things. I got back from that New York program a few months ago. Thought I'd bring her a gift." Tom looked down at the framed photo. It was a sunset, much like the ones Lily used to capture, but with Peter's own unique perspective. The light filtered through tree branches, creating patterns that looked almost like writing across the water's surface. "It's beautiful," Tom said, honestly. She would have loved it. "I've been wondering," Peter said, looking slightly embarrassed. "That day I came here last year, did you happen to be visiting too? I thought I felt someone watching." Tom hesitated, then smiled. "Something like that," he said. Lily had a way of bringing people together even after she was gone. Later that evening, Tom stood at a podium in the community center's main hall, looking out at the gathered crowd. Jenny was in the front row, beautiful in a blue dress the same shade as Lily's eyes. Next to her sat Tom's father, looking uncomfortable, in his suit but proud as he surveyed the room full of people who had come to support the foundation. The walls were covered with Lily's photographs, enlarged and beautifully framed. Between them hung statements from people whose lives she had touched. The nurse with her stone angel, the bus driver with his morning route, the classmates and teachers and neighbors who had each seen something special in the quiet girl with the camera. And scattered throughout the crowd were the 20 young photographers receiving the foundation's first scholarships, teenagers with talent and vision but limited resources, each holding a brand new camera provided by the foundation. "A year ago," Tom began, his voice steady despite the emotion welling in his chest, "my daughter Lily left this world much too soon. She was 16 years old, with a talent for seeing beauty in places most people never thought to look." He paused, looking around at the photographs that surrounded them all, evidence of Lily's unique vision. "What I've learned since then is that a life doesn't end when the heart stops beating. It continues in the memories we share, in the lives we've touched, in the beauty we've created." Lily knew that somehow, She wanted to capture what happens after we're gone. Tom smiled, thinking of the camera hidden in the coffin, the unexpected gift it had given him. This foundation is her legacy. Not just the photographs she took, but the way she saw the world. With curiosity, with compassion, with an eye for the extraordinary hiding within the ordinary. Through these scholarships, through this community we're building, Lily's vision lives on. As applause filled the room, Tom looked up at Lily's largest photograph hanging behind him, a sunrise over their backyard, light breaking through clouds promising a new day. He had put a camera in his daughter's coffin hoping to capture what happened after she was gone. What he'd found instead was the beginning of something new, not an ending, but a continuation. A story that wasn't finished even if her life was. And in that discovery he had found not just comfort but purpose, not just memory but legacy, not just goodbye, but a different kind of hello.